Welcome. This is the Gurmat development module, and this module is going to look at two aspects. One, the Gurmat psychological perspective on the self and its development in terms of human development. And the first session looks at life stages and development. And we're going to look at this in comparison with some of the existing models of human development within Western psychology, like Carl Rogers, Maslow, Erickson, and we're going to look at this in relation to any existing Indic models that were there, and then we're going to see how the Gurmat model, does it fit in, does it complement this, or is it in fact different from the existing models. The second session in this module introduces the psycho-spiritual continuum, your Antkaran. And this Antkaran is a particular, let's call it internal psychological sarir, body. It's your mind, your emotions, your thoughts, your internal perspective. And Gurmat provides a very clear definition of these, which are very hard to find in Western psychology, and I would say they are present in Eastern psychology, but hidden. So coming back to the first session. The first session looks at Erickson's theory of life stages and any Indic theory of life stages in terms of how does a human being develop. Now, within the human being development, if we look at on the left side, life stages from infancy all the way to old age, we look at next to it the quality that develops at different age ranges, and the virtue that is cultivated or is deemed to be cultivated as a positive quality here. Now, these all come from Erickson's understanding of human development, which is like the kind of mainstream understanding with a few amendments and refinements that have gone along. And these were actually based, like a lot of Western psychological systems, in taking things that already existed in the East and repurposing it in a way that fits their a world model, which was materialistic, a world model in which life is considered to be an accident, purposeless, and all that kind of stuff. So the Chaar Padarth is a well-known Indian understanding structure of human development. Artha, which is your physical needs, which Maslow relates as your food, security, warmth, safety. And then from here we move into your emotional needs, which Maslow looks in terms of esteem, but within the Indian model, it's actually considered as karma, which is your gratification of your emotional needs, the gratification of your needs. And once that need is fulfilled, then we go into the need of ethics, dharma, and then through the cultivation of personal ethics, we come to the state of mukti or moksha, which is salvation. Now, these four identities of human development, or a purposeful way of developing human beings, was then taken over by Erickson, repurposed, and then put out as 8 stages of a human being's development. You will notice that on the right hand side in the Indic theory of life stages, the life stage begins with karmic history and caste, because the Indic system was built on castes. And therefore you became a brahmacharya, which was a student, you then became a householder, you then became a teacher, and then finally a renunciate or a sannyasi. And the life goals, which seem to be fairly well defined in this model, is knowledge of dharma, how to live a right life, how to live an ethical life, spiritual knowledge. Then we move into caste identity, where you identify with how your caste, because within the Indic system, it was only Brahmin men who were actually provided with any knowledge to do with Dharma. All Brahma women had to learn from men, and more importantly, no other caste, the Khatri, the Sudra, or the Vash, the three other castes were not allowed to access spiritual knowledge, and in fact they were punished for it. So once this happened with those chosen few, the Brahmins, then you went into the practice of this, and the Brahma, the priest became your authority and cultivated karma and also cultivated wealth. And if you look at the mandirs and the religious institutions around, we'll see that that's probably the case even now. And then you retire and you teach, you become one of these sannyasis and you teach the world, get your little ashram together, and then salvation, mukti. So that was like a Eastern worldview, and this is the Western worldview. Now let's look at this in relation to Gurmat. Now within Gurmat, I've left this here again on the left hand side exactly as it was. We've put here in the middle the Hindu states, and on the Gurmat states, we look, and actually everything on the Indic states and the Erickson states you can find in Gurbani, but you will find it as the Jivan of a Manmukh. Someone who gets immersed in strengthening the sense of self as an individual, and gratifying a sense of purpose through this identity of self. Gurbani looks at this as blindness, not blindness of eyes, but blindness of knowledge, knowledge of who you are, what the purpose of life can be if you allow yourself to open to perhaps considering yourself beyond the identity that you have given yourself or that has been imposed on you with conditioning. So Gurbani does not look at the human development just in terms of actions within the lived life, so to speak, the real life, as one would say. But actually it considers real human development in terms of spiritual life stages. And spiritual life stages are mimicked in some ways to the 4 Padarth. So you have Gyan Padarth, which is knowledge of self, knowledge of self-inquiry, method of self-inquiry, concepts of self-inquiry, concepts of and processes in this transformation. The signposts of this transformation. So there is transpersonal knowledge, there's psychological knowledge, and there is knowledge of consciousness, and there is methodology within Gyan Padarth. And Gyan Padarth cannot come from books. It comes from a lived experience. It comes from a living flame. From Gyan Padarth, the second Padarth, and Padarth here is anything that can be used in life. The second Padarth is, we can break this down into 2 divisions. The first stage of Naam Padarth, which then transforms into Prem Padarth. Prem, we can look at this as looking at life through the eyes of compassion, eyes of acceptance, not in a resisting way, but in an accepting way. And Naam Padarth in the early stages begins with focusing your awareness on a particular sound, but also jap in terms of the understanding that comes with it. So these 2 together become our discipline, our marag. That then leads you to the second stage of Naam Padarth, which is a realization. So a realization here is a realization of self, that we are not bound through our ego. Now this can only come through the observation of self, right? Man tu jot swarup apna mool pachan. For example, in Gurbani it says that you are the essence, recognize yourself, and the address is to the mind. And then we have other Gurmat directives of Bande khoj dil har roj. So if we were to translate this very simply, it is saying, O mortal being, or bound self, please search your heart. So the question arises, what do you mean by heart? What do you mean by dil? What do you mean by khoj? So in this Naam Padarth, we begin to recognize our states of awareness. We begin to sit in contentment. We begin to practice mindfulness as the first entry point from which we then develop into that space of stillness or presence. Well, what's going on there? What is happening within me? And that illuminates over time structures that we are not, until we are illuminating of that which we are. Janam Padarth is the significant space here in which there is a birth taking place. Now here, this birth is as a realization, and this birth, Janam Padarth, then becomes your practice. You begin to practice this. You begin to, your way of being is your way of teaching. And that is what gives us freedom from our sense of self, our mukt. We become free from our own bound self. And if we were to break this down even further and look at this in terms of Gurmat life stages, you'll notice that actually it can be mapped across. Gurmat does not identify maturity in terms of years or age, in terms of infancy, childhood, play age, adolescent, etc. Life or maturity is not age dependent. It's dependent on your understanding, your Gyan. So the first stage of life, or when you are an infancy, right up to the age of school, is the age of a manmukh. So as long as you don't have any understanding of self, you are a manmukh. So you can wear all the dresses, you can go do all the practices, but ultimately manmukh is those who are fused with the content of their mind. So once you bring Gyan Padarth here, understanding of the mind, understanding of the self, and technology or techniques and skills to cultivate that, we enter the first stage, which is becoming a Sikh, the brahmacharya, a student. And a Sikh demands an attitude of not knowing, an attitude of wishing to know. And as a result, we accumulate knowledge through our practice of our own personal ethics, our own dharma. And through our spiritual practice, our khoj of our internal self, we begin to gain knowledge of the self, spiritual knowledge. This is Naam Padarth, Prem Padarth, becoming, identifying, becoming present in our lived experience. The caste identity has been replaced by Sangat. Here, when we congregate together with those who are on the path of self-realization and self-development, then that collective consciousness enables Naam Padarth to move into a state of flourishing, we can say, supported by one another. And this leads to realization of our sense of bound self, our our bound self, to an unbound self. Though the individual still exists, but their sense of self has now completely changed, which gives rise to Janam Padarth, a new way of living as a householder. Here we enter the universe, here we enter the world, here we enter society. But we enter society with understanding of dharam. We enter society not as a politician, but as those who are awakened to themselves. So when we practice our life, when we live our life in the Gristi Jivan, in the householder Jivan, we live in a life that is transparent. We are honest to ourselves and others. We work from the basis of understanding and compassion. We work from the basis of self-acceptance. We have practices in place to enable us that, yes, We see pleasure and we see pain as part and parcel of life. So we're not drawn towards one and we're not drawn against another. We accept life for what it is. And our true prosperity is our own inner knowledge. This, when we matures into the adulthood, well, those words we would use are Sad, Sant, Gurmukh, Bhagat, words which signify an individual who has reached a certain state of self-realization. Mukta Padarth. These people are now ready to teach others because they have walked the path. They have actually done it themselves. And when we have truly achieved what we call old age, we can call that Brahm Gyan. Where Brahm Gyan, now remember, I keep stressing this, Gurbani does not measure age in terms of years and chronology. It measures age in terms of maturity, maturity of self, consciousness. How much do you know about your mind? What do you know about your mind? And who's telling you about your mind? So these are very, very essential qualities of self-development. And if we see this, we can see that Gurbani actually provides us with an opportunity to recognize who we are, and how to live that life through this spiritual understanding of the Chaar Padarth.